What's going on, y'all? I want to give you an overview of the Abbey Road's TG12345 channel strip from Waves. So I recently picked up the Abbey Road's bundle from Waves and want to do an overview of this channel strip as well as some of the other plugins in the Abbey Roads line because they're not as straightforward as some of the other channel strips like the Omni or the SSL or the CLA Mix Hub. So this is based off the TG12345 solid state console from Abbey Roads. And even just looking at this, you may just notice some things that's just not, that you may not understand from just a typical channel strip. So let's do an overview and let's also, of course, listen to how this sounds. I've got this up on this session, which is some drums, guitars, and a bass guitar. So up at the top, upper left here, we have your input. This is going to select the input of signal coming into the channel strip. Below that, you have dynamics. You can have the dynamic section out completely. A compressor, which is a 2-to-1 with the fixed attack. And you've got a limiter at 7-to-1 with a, again, fixed attack. Your hold. So hold is not a release, but hold is more like how long do you want it to hold the gain reduction before it releases, and we'll take a look at that later. Recovery, this is your release. You've got 1 is 100 milliseconds, 2 is 250 milliseconds, 3 is 500 milliseconds, and I think it goes from 1 second to 1.5 to 2 seconds or something similar to that when you get above 3. I really don't use it above 3. Here you've got your mix for wet and dry, and then you've got a high pass filter for the compression to take the lows out of the compression circuit. Moving on to the middle section, at the top you got your routing. So this is broken up into, you've got 3 sections that goes into the routing. So by default it's set to dynamics, EQ, and then presence, which presence and EQ is kind of the same thing, but you can split these up. For example, the first option there, you've got EQ, dynamics, and then presence. So let's look at the EQ section. So presence is your mid section here, which is a Bell filter for these frequencies. And while this does look like it is stepped, this is actually variable. So you can't get in between those frequencies. So that's your presence. Your high band, which is labeled treble, this is unique in the fact that if you're boosting, it's a 5K shelf, and if you're cutting, it's a 10K cut, which is, I don't know, it's kind of weird. But so yeah, so if I come this way, that's a 10K shelf cut. Actually, let me make sure I get this right. So if you're going left, if you're cutting, that's a 10K shelf cut. But if you're boosting, it's a 5K Bell filter boost. So I apologize. Yeah, that's not a shelf on the top end. I'm used to EQs having a shelf on the top end, but this is no. When you boost in the treble, it's a 5K Bell filter boost, not a shelf. But if you're cutting 10K shelf. The bass, this is a fixed 50 hertz bass, and that's cut 50 hertz shelf, and that's cut or boost at 50 hertz. So one thing you will, once you really get into this and notice that you're really missing a lot of frequencies here because your bass is at 50 hertz and then the presence starts at 500 hertz. So you're missing everything in that low mid, and which is, a reason that I don't really use this on vocals a lot, because those low mids I normally have to either cut or boost them. I need to do something to those low mids when I'm mixing vocals, and this channel strip just doesn't have those frequencies. So that's one thing to point out. And last button here is just your bypass for the EQ section. All right, and on the right side here, let's start at the top with these interesting looking VU meters, which you can set the VU meters gain reduction, input, output. Your meter in the middle is a peak meter. You've got the dual mono, stereo, and mid side. You have a stereo width spreader here, which is pretty cool. Noise, you can add noise if you like. Here you can select what you're monitoring. You can monitor the left channel in mono, stereo, or the right channel. So this channel 1 and channel 2. So Waves actually modeled 2 channels from this console. And while it is subtle, if I flip through them, enough time to me, and we'll flip through these as well later, but I feel like channel 1 is just a little more open and channel 2 is just a little dark on the top. Below that, you've got your drive. This is going to drive some saturation into the signal. And your in this middle here is your output fader to boost your output gain. And then you also have phase here at the bottom. So that's the overview of the controls of the TG12345. Let's take a listen to how it sounds. Okay, so let's start with the drums. So I'm just going to solo the drum bus and pull up the instance that we have on it here. And I believe this is what I was already working with, but let's switch this into compressor because that limiter is pretty aggressive. Yes, we got the mix at 50-50. Okay, so I'm going to first just play this and bring it in and out so you can hear what it's doing to the drums, and then we'll play around with some settings. And you do hear the electric guitar in there too, because these bass, electric guitar, and drums is all recorded in the same room. So that's me bypassing the TG12345, and this is with the mix at 50%. So let's go ahead and bring this all the way in, and let's mess with some settings here. Let's see, let's reset this boost here, and I'll play with some in the mid-range here as well. Actually, let's go ahead and take a look at this hold. So you'll notice that I'll go ahead and crank this all the way. You'll notice that now once you see the compressor reduce the gain, you can also see it hold there. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. So you can see how the needle is pinned there. So I'm going to slowly just bring it back down so you can see how it reacts. So normally when I'm using that, I'm using it at maybe somewhere between 10 and 15, not doing too much. But this will allow you just to hold that compression for a certain amount of time before it releases. And let's go through these release settings. For that, let's go ahead and just take the hold all the way off. So 1 is the fastest release, and 1 back to 6, it goes from fastest to the slowest. All right, let's mess around with the EQ a little bit. Let's do a boost up here at 1.2. So that 1.2 boost is really bringing forward the electric guitars in here. Let's switch between these two channels. Select now. This is a little annoying here for me, but so you have, I'm in stereo, but it's not linking these. So you can see as I'm switching between channel 1 and channel 2, that's only for the left side. The right side is, so you can mismatch these channels, but I want them to move together, so I'm just going to link them here and then move them together. So let's take a listen to the difference between channel 1 and channel 2. Okay, and let's listen to the stereo spreader here. So it definitely adds a nice effect to the stereo width there. Let's move to the bass. I can show you the drive here. We'll solo that. And this, we've been using the stereo version. This is now the mono version. So I do like what the drive does here. It gives you a nice overdriven sound. And lastly, let's look at the electric guitars here. And we'll solo those. Let's go through the stereo spreader on the guitars. Okay, I'm not hearing as big a difference on that as I did with the drums. Let's mess with the presence now on the guitars. Okay, so there's an example of that on the guitars. What I do really like about this channel strip is that you're able to click in these gain values around it. You know, not all plugins allow you to do this. They'll force you to take the knob and physically to turn it with the mouse. I do like that I can, this allows me to compare things really quickly. Like, you know, if I'm cutting at 6 dB, if I want to get back to 0, I can just click 0 and it'll take me right back to 0 rather than me having to turn the knob back to 0. So that's really good for A/B comparisons. But there's an overview of the Abbey Roads TG12345 channel strip from Waves. I'll have a link in the description if you want to check this out from Waves. And any questions, comments, let me know, and I'll catch y'all next time. I want to invite everyone to check out my new podcast, the Faders Up Podcast. It's a podcast about pro audio. I've got me and three other Nashville professionals. We're discussing pro audio topics, pro audio lifestyle. And it's available on Apple Podcasts and it's available on Spotify. So check it out, rate it, let me know what you think.